Welcome back, geeks and nerds, to another episode of Real Geeks. This time, we're reviewing Solo, Star Wars story.
Are you sure that was called? Because I spent a lot of the movie, I was convinced it was references a Star Wars story. And I think the marketing department thought it was called Lando, a Star Wars story. So this was a little confusing.
All right, so just a quick refresher of what this movie basically is.
We now return to this Real Geeks review, already in progress.
We see them on Corellia, which I was surprised a little bit to see Corellia featured. Corellia has descended into this cesspool of crime running rampant all over the place.
Yeah, Act 1 is basically Oliver Twist in space.
Yeah, that is a pretty good way to summarize it. And so we are introduced to the relationship between Han and Emilia Clarke's character, Kira. And they are basically fleeing this crime lord and trying to get off-world and start their new lives together. And one thing leads to another. Ultimately, Han gets off-world and Kira does not. The way that Han ends up getting off-world is through enlisting in the Empire, which is harkening back a bit to the Legends side of things.
Yes.
Cut to 3 years later, Han is in infantry. I forget the name of the planet that they're on during the battle scene that they're featuring.
I can't remember off the top of my head if they actually said the name.
It's basically a mud ball.
Yeah. You might as well literally call it Planet Mudball the way they reference it like that so many times.
Mm-hmm. Han runs into Woody Harrelson's character and his band of smugglers. At the time, upon initial meeting, not realizing that they're smugglers, finding out over the course of interacting with them, and wanting to join them to get out of being in the infantry because he's done with the Empire.
He hasn't deserted enough times. Because he's in the infantry specifically because he deserted from the flight academy.
Yeah. He ends up getting thrown into a pit. Like, how many times are characters going to get thrown into pits in this franchise?
Yeah.
And...
Actually, how many times is something we're going to be saying a fair amount with this movie, to be honest?
True.
Yeah.
This is where he meets Chewie. We'll get into details about this scene in a bit, but ultimately he meets Chewie here. They end up devising an escape after a bit of a tussle with each other, and they end up going to Woody Harrelson's character's crew again. His name's Beckett, by the way. They take them on, and they go to do this heist, and things go awry when a bunch of pirates go after them in this heist, and a couple of them don't make it, and they ultimately end up failing at the heist,
Han dropped the cargo because, again, references a Star Wars story.
Yeah. And, so they end up going to the big gangster guy who hired them in the first place, who's played by Paul Bettany. And this is where we end up seeing Han running into Kira again. Apparently she's now with the gangster guy now. She's been with him for a while now. This is how she ended up getting off of Corellia. And ultimately, they give him a reason not to kill them by coming up with another plan of how to get the thing that he wanted, which was, I'm trying to remember the name of the stuff again.
I think we'll just go with hyperfuel.
Yeah, hyperfuel. So space fuel, basically, but in its raw form, and the idea it's on the planet Kessel. Again,
references a Star Wars story.
Hence, the Kessel Run. So of course, they need a ship to do this, and this is where they end up going to meet Lando, and this is how the Millennium Falcon comes into play, and stuff ensues, and the rest is kind of spoiler territory, so I won't delve too much more into the plot in that regard. But
if you've seen A New Hope, you don't need the last act of this movie spoiled, because really a lot of that is A New Hope, Han's arc in A New Hope again.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Yeah. So really, there's not too much I could say about this movie in terms of how I feel about it without getting into spoiler territory. Solo.
No one cares why his name is Han Solo. No one.
And
that was so painful.
Of all the ways for him to get his name, he enlists in the Empire. He wants to enlist in the Flight Academy. And the registrar guy is like asking his name. He says his name's Han. And he's like, what's your last name?
Yeah, it's like, what's your clan name? Who are you affiliated with? Something along
those lines. And he says he doesn't have anyone. And he's like, And then
Han.
Being a cheeky Imperial officer, he's like, Han Solo. And like that in and of itself is bad enough.
Yeah, the guy when he entered the name, he might as well have just looked right at the camera and gone, huh? You like that one?
You should have just called him Han Loner at that point.
Yeah.
Like, my God, you have. If you want to give him his name in this movie in some capacity, that's fine. But we were perfectly fine with the idea that his name from birth was Han Solo. We didn't need to have it be given to him by some person.
No, it's just, again, references for the sake of references
is utter stupidity.
They don't work.
And this was probably the most glaring of all of them. That being said, some references did work.
Yeah.
The blaster. I liked that it was Beckett's rifle, and he literally dismantled it into just the blaster part, and then just handed it off to him. Because he's like, we're going on a mission. You need a gun. Here you go. And the fact that he's held on to that blaster ever since is a testament to, even after everything that's happened in this movie, how much Beckett's character really meant to him.
Yeah, I think for me that specifically was kind of a hit or miss reference. On the one hand, as a buddy of mine mentioned after we saw the movie, doing it that way, like having him take apart the rifle and hand it to him as a pistol, that explains the giant scope on the thing. Which is a nice little detail that, again, okay, cool. But on the other hand, again, I didn't need to know.
No.
I don't care why he got the blaster. I was literally half expecting them to throw Chewie a bowcaster in that same scene just because.
Another reference, though, that also was kind of a hit or miss thing for me was in the scene where Han first meets Chewie. The reference is that probably just before Chewie is right about to actually kill him, he actually starts pleading for his life with him but he's speaking Wookiee.
Yeah.
And this was an interesting thing for me because in some ways it works because, okay, this explains why he understands Chewie throughout the movies.
And it also explains why we've never heard Han actually speak Wookiee before now.
Because he's not great at speaking Wookiee. And that's partially why it's kind of hit or miss for me, because he doesn't speak it well, and so it's kind of weird. It works in some ways, but it's kind of a weird.
It's half reference, half comedy.
Yeah.
And I think in that it works in that it's funny, but it's not a comedic scene where they're bludgeoning you over the head with the fact that he doesn't speak Wookiee all that well.
Yeah.
And it's enough of a reference to this is how they met. This is essentially why Chewie has the life debt now.
Yeah.
Which it would have been nice
to actually get that as a reference.
Yeah, like it would have been nice to directly hear life debt, or to have Chewie's situation more severe where Han is clearly actually saving his life.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time here it's like, yeah, okay, good enough.
Yeah. And I think that goes to a certain thing about this movie that I really didn't like was the pacing.
Yeah.
Because there are times where they should have done certain things and instead did others, and it was clearly a matter of we gotta get to crunch time, we gotta fit this movie into a certain time frame, and so they blow through certain scenes in a way that just doesn't work. And I think part of that also comes to the fact that some of the movie was shot by Lord Miller, and when Ron Howard took over, he reshot a lot of that, but I think that there was still like a creative element, a tonal element, a mindset element in that process that had certain scenes go a certain way because they were being done that way through Lord Miller, and then the follow-ups are done a different way because that's how Ron Howard did it. And it doesn't necessarily show its head throughout the whole movie, but there are certain scenes where you're just like, they could have held on this a little bit longer, or they could have focused on this element for a bit more, and instead they're just like, ABC, next scene.
Yeah.
And one of those key scenes, I think, was the heist.
I think that does go to a more general problem that I had with that first heist sequence where, y'all, yes, it's a wonderful action sequence. I don't think this movie needed 2 heists.
No.
I think you could have done this story where that first heist with Beckett's crew takes place off screen.
Mm-hmm.
They're hiding in the infantry to avoid Paul Bettany's character, and then Han meets up with him. Everything like unfolds the way it does. As much as, frankly, I would have rather seen this occur at the Flight Academy. And then you go into planning the heist, meeting up with Lando, and so on and so forth. Like, I think instead of those extra sequences, you could have developed that second heist, stretched that out more, see them planning it, really develop and enrich that one. Like, there was a lot more that could have been done there.
Yeah. And another one of those sort of jarring things where I think like the creative process of what was going on with Lord Miller versus what was going on with Ron Howard, there might have been a bit of a disconnect, was the whole thing with that pirate gang, and I can't remember their name off the top of my head for the life of me, but
the ones that kind of look like Sand Raiders.
Yeah, in some respect.
Yeah,
I feel like the main leader of that, like when we first see that character, we are led to assume that that character is a he because of like the voice modulation and all that sort of stuff. It's one of those situations where, like, whoa, these seem to be the bad guys, but then we get to the near the end of the third act, and surprise, character's not a guy. It's not only a female, but a young, like almost a kid female. And on top of that, she is actually a part of a rebellion. Like there's an element of that where I can appreciate where it's like, yeah, in that earlier scene, as far as she was concerned, they were smuggling something from one bad source, but to give it to another bad source.
Yeah.
Whereas in this scene, it was more of a sort of act of desperation.
Yeah, I think there were too many elements of this movie that were done because they were Star Wars safe. And
this goes back to getting Ron Howard as director in the first place. As soon as I heard that Lord and Miller were out and that Ron Howard was in, I was like, okay, so this is going to be a safe Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily make a bad movie. And overall, I wouldn't even say that this was a bad movie.
No, it's really not.
But it's not a great movie. And people are going to come out of this movie thinking, it was alright, wasn't great, wasn't terrible, it was just alright. And that's almost more of a disservice to Star Wars. Because if it's a movie that people love, then that just shows that this is a direction that they need to move in a bit more and kind of play with a bit more and tweak in a way that it helps progress things in that sort of direction. If it's a movie that people hate, then they have lessons learned and they know what to avoid or what to do differently in future Star Wars endeavors. But with a movie that's sort of middle of the road, it's hard to piece together what works and what doesn't, and to find a common ground for which they can build off of.
Again, much like yourself, didn't love it. I know Star Wars fans who did, and I'm not going to argue with y'all because I'm not there with you, but I can see why you got as much enjoyment out of this as you did. I don't think this is going to be as divisive as Last Jedi was, because this is not something where we're going to be hearing from people who fear change. That said, again, there's just too much that's hurried that is and thrown in just to do it.
Yeah. L3's character was I think,
we have our first woke droid.
I think there's elements of that character that may have been a bit forced at times, but I did get a kick out of her, and I really appreciated the fact that in the end, when she died, they basically uploaded her navigational files, I guess you could call them, or whatever. They uploaded them into the ship.
Yeah, they basically put her brain into the Falcon because I think, again, it's referenced somewhere in the past in Star Wars that the Falcon has a droid brain.
Actually, it has 3 different droids as a part of its systems, but when the fact that we got to finally see one of those droids being added to the Falcon, but then they had to go and do this whole thing of Han's just saying, I did it in 12 parsecs. Like,
round it down. Round it down.
Yeah. Like, it's a funny moment.
Yeah.
And I get that would be kind of something that his character would do.
Oh no, yeah,
he would
work because he would totally just be like, yeah, it was that way.
But it almost at the same time kind of diminishes it, because before all of this, we were just like, he did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. That sounds impressive. I don't know what that means, but that sounds impressive. And in reality, yeah, it's impressive. It's not that impressive.
Well, I mean, there's that saying, the victors write the history books.
Mm-hmm.
Han, let's be honest, our favorite scruffy-looking nerf herder is a braggart. If anyone is going to pump up this legend, it's going to be him.
It's fair.
So I had no problem with that because that made perfect sense. I'm feeling like at this point we want to go just straight into ratings.
Yeah. Solid 3.
Yeah, me too. 3 out of 5. This is, like I said, it's that mid-range. It's fun. You're not gonna get the epic feel of any of the main trilogies, and not even the epic feel that was Rogue One, frankly. I think if you're going into this expecting anything more than to just have a good time, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. Alden Ehrenreich, leave the boy alone. He is not Harrison Ford.
No.
But
and here's the thing too. Harrison Ford said he did a good job.
Exactly.
If Han Solo says that Han Solo was Han Solo, you can shut the fuck up.
Yeah, just stop. Just stop. Like, as much
this isn't a James Cameron saying that this is a great movie scenario like with Terminator Genesis.
Can we hold on to that joke for the Venom movie, please? I don't know how we go there and not go to symbiotes immediately. You file that away.
Yes, sir. Oh boy.
Donald Glover. Okay, let's be honest. Disney, Lucasfilm, I know you don't have a plan to do this yet, which I kind of respect the fact that you're not jumping into it. But if you don't do a Lando movie, you are out of your fucking minds. You need to get the ball rolling on that.
One last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up. Han shot first. Han fucking shot first. It is confirmed. It is canon. Before we even get to A New Hope, it is confirmed. He shot first, and he learned that in the best way possible. Because it would have been a total disservice to the character. Like, this would have been the icing on the cake of things that I didn't like about this movie if it was Beckett who literally said, one last thing I'm going to teach you, always shoot first. If he had actually said that, I would have been like, really? But before he even gets a chance to say anything like that, boom, shot in the chest. And I'm just like, thank you.
And
action over words.
Yeah, and just as an aside to that, for the final word and a bit of a personal note, I do want to take a moment to kind of pay tribute to a recently canceled TV show that I've referenced in our reviews a few times. The Canadian entertainment news show Inner Space, which was just canceled this past week. Bell Media, you can go fuck yourselves, number one. And number two, I wanted to note that in one of the stories that they did, kind of promoting Solo a bit, AJ Fry did specifically call for a moment like that of some sort. So, dude, well done, and I hope you were happy seeing that. And
you will be missed until your next project.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what you guys do next. But with that, I have no idea what the hell we're reviewing next month. But
maybe Incredibles?
Oh, is it June or July?
June 15th.
Alright, yeah, we're probably doing Incredibles next. I literally have no idea what's coming out next month. But, until then,
it's a wrap.
See yas.
Real Geeks is a Geeksploitation production and is filmed in front of an imaginary studio audience.